Hi everyone, it's Rob Watson, the module leader for TECH2503 Community Media Production, and this week is the 9th lecture of our lecture series, and we're going to be talking about the idea of kind of place, local identity and community. But we're going to look at this from the perspective of community development, and we're going to look at this from the perspective of sustainability and what kind of decisions, what kind of things do we need to understand, what kind of framework of understanding do we need to identify in order to be able to put forward a model of development and sustainability that actually allows us to undertake the tasks that they want to do. And this is taken from it's a chapter in the Stephen Moore book by Robinson and Westerhoff. It's regenerative sustainability, rethinking neighbourhood sustainability. And what I wanted to do was draw on the kind of broad principles of neighbourhood sustainability that are put forward, which I've said this a number of times, but community media is never written about in this context. It doesn't seem to me to be written about in this context. It's something which is kind of, it's not in the sustainability lexicon. People who are engaged in urban and social sustainability and social development thinking don't place community media and communication highly within the list of priorities. It's there in a tangential way, but it's not there explicitly. And one of the things our job is to do is to bring it to the fore and make sure that it's directly dealt with. So we're thinking about the idea, kind of what gives us a kind of sense of sustainability, and we're looking at this within a social dimension, I suppose. And so we need to take into account those things which are scarce and those things which are abundant within our societies, within our communities, and those things which kind of, if you like, kind of we know will be harmful, and those things which we know which we can rehabilitate, if you like, in order to be able to plan for the future. And at some point there's a kind of, there's a challenge to overcome a sense of apathy and a kind of sense of denial. And a sense of, how do we return to a sense of ownership? How do we embed and support a sense of empowerment within communities so that they feel that we have a part to play in our own destiny as a community, despite the kind of the forces that maybe shape the world that we perceive that we're living in. So we'll look at this we'll draw on some examples from experience in Leicester about neighbourhood sustainability and regeneration, and the thinking about the kind of the trajectory, if you like, that sustainability models often work on the basis of. So it's kind of, what is our aim? Are we engaged in a system, an approach that needs lots of energy to enforce or to renew? If our sense of neighbourliness and our sense of community is what's the phrase I'm looking for? If it's dysfunctional, how much energy do we need to put in place to make it functional again? And that's an important question, because we want to use our energy carefully so that we don't have to spend a lot of time. What makes something self-sustaining rather than it always requiring a lot of resources for it to be able to be reproduced and to be developed? We want it to be something which can carry its own force and move forward in a way which kind of regenerates rather than degenerates the kind of outcomes that we're looking for. So we have to kind of consider the context in which social and community development takes place. So we're going to recognise and we're going to think about the kind of worldview that is understood about our sense of communities. What's the model of community that we've had? And this means we're going into the idea of what communities are about in much more detail than we have done previously, because it's socially, we're recognising that it's socially constructed and that it's socially mediated, and that many of the concepts, when you actually start to look at them, they're contested and they're kind of, they're fought over, and there's a politics to the suggestions of what solutions might work and what won't work and where do they come from. So this is kind of, we need to look at this from an interdisciplinary approach. We need to look at this in terms of the kind of conversations that will emerge, the kind of solutions and the suggestions for ways forward that will emerge from those conversations. This is a development process, not a fixed set of prescripted answers and responses. This is something that we know will change, and that if we can't apply the same principles and the same factors in one community as you would do with another community, because the needs are different. And so how do we interpret those needs? How do we define and redefine the goals of development and sustainability, because they're always changing, and society doesn't stay still, and our social resources don't stay still. So what, kind of, we need to go into what the detail of these are. And so what we're thinking about is a kind of how can we construct a framework to understand the process of redevelopment, of social community development. What are the kind of expectations that we can have of that framework? How can we work out what is important and what is less important? What is immediate and what is can be delayed, if you like? What is close to us and what is a distant prospect for us, where we need to engage others in a more wider conversation and debate? What I suppose drives us as community media advocates is a sense of empowerment for people to have a say in their own destiny and their own the outcomes of any kind of redevelopment process. So what kind of strategies would we need to put in place which help manage change? How would we accommodate different scales? What would work well on a local neighbourhood response might not work so well on a whole city approach or a regional approach. One size doesn't fit all. And we'll look at some examples from Leicester about how suggestions for social and community redevelopment have been shaped and changed, and the lack of discussion really that is taking place in Leicester about the objectives of community development and what we want out of it is very stark. There isn't a common ground of debate and discussion. Well, not that I'm aware of. And maybe that might be one of the things that we talk about. Maybe it could be a topic for the social media cafes, the community media cafes, is to look at the idea of urban regeneration in Leicester. What do people want out of it? What will make people live more sustainably and more socially agreeably, if you like? What would enhance our well-being rather than detract from our well-being? So I suppose our aim is to promote a sense of positive change. And we want to do that through recognising that this process is ongoing and dynamic, and that there are many different factors which influence how we can think about community development and community change. Is this a process which is defined by a few small experts, or is it something that is shared by the wider community? So these are really kind of important matters, and the kind of initiatives that grow locally are much more important than the kind of initiatives that are handed down from on high, if you like, from technocrats, from bureaucrats, those kind of things. So the role of community in its own sustainable development is really key to this. And how do we, as media communicators, enhance and support that discussion and that conversation so that we can learn from it and we can represent the range of views that might be out there and find some common ground for some basic things that we might want to do. So we can ask some questions about what the role is then of community media and regeneration. Right, there's a lot there, as ever. It's a good, we're pushing through with a lot of really good, interesting topics. The notes, as ever, are up on the DMU Commons wiki. Just go to wiki.our.dmu.ac.uk and look for the TECH2503 section, and I'll see you at the lecture on Tuesday.